So here's your big question. If 2-1-2 means that in the masculine it follows second declension, in the feminine first, and in the neuter second, so 2-1-2, what would 3-1-3 mean? Did you guess it? Hopefully it sort of makes sense here, right? That if 2-1-2 is masculine, feminine, neuter, well, the 3-1-3 will tell you again that in the masculine it follows this time third declension, in the feminine first declension, and in the neuter third declension, 3-1-3. Let's take a look. We start by looking at this table just a bit closer. Make sure you get this. 2-1-2 adjectives here will follow second declension in the masculine, first in the feminine, second in the neuter. 3-1-3s will just follow third in the masculine, first in the feminine, and third in the neuter. Here is the full paradigm for pos. Pos is a very common word in Greek. It means all or every. We'll see it in John 1 quite a bit, so we'll look at this in context in just a minute. But the main thing is I want you to see how this adjective is changing forms to show us its case, number, and gender. Okay, now we're used to this form looking a lot like this right here, 2-1-2. Because so far we've only looked at adjectives that follow a 2-1-2 pattern. But look at these columns in blue. This is the 3-1-3 pattern. Okay, so in the masculine it will follow third declension. In the feminine, first declension. And in the neuter, third declension. Now let's just look at that a word at a time. Okay, so in the masculine, I want to be able to show case, number, and gender for masculine subjects. Okay, I'm going to follow third declension, which means I follow this column. So we have pos, pontos, ponti, ponta, pontes, ponton, pasi, pontas. So almost perfectly, right? Follows this third declension pattern. Actually, it does perfectly follow that pattern. In the feminine, we tack on these endings. So in the feminine, it's pasa, pas-es, pas-a, pas-on, pas-I, pas-on, pas-ice, pas-us. Very cooperative, right? Following the feminine declension here perfectly. And in the neuter, we're back to third declension. So we pop over here, right? So it becomes pon, pont-as, ponti, pon. Pont-a, pont-on, pasi, pont-a. Now don't worry too much about what I'm about to show you here, but just in case you have one of those inquiring minds that wants to know, why is pos a 3-1-3 adjective? There's a very logical reason. Now we saw, remember, that third declension nouns were nouns in which the stem ended in a consonant. So for example, when we came to sarx, we saw the stem was sark, ended in a kappa, right? With phos, we saw that the stem was phot. Well, when it comes to adjectives, you have a masculine form of the stem, a feminine form of the stem, and a neuter form of the stem. And the way this works out with pos is that the stem in the masculine and neuter is pont. Notice it ends with a consonant. Therefore, third declension. In the feminine, it ends in an alpha. So we have posa. So this is a first declension. So it's all very logical. Now, how do we get from pont in the nominative masculine singular to pos? Well, when you add a sigma, like if we were to do this, add a sigma onto the end here, it would be ponts. And they didn't like saying and so they just simplified it to sigma. And over here, the ending should be nothing, okay? So how did they come up with pon? Well, they dropped the tau. Now we're used to this nominative singular forms, especially in the masculine and neuter, can be odd. But other than that, notice that it's just perfectly regular. But how would you know that pos was a 3-1-3 adjective if you were to look it up in the lexicon? Well, look at how it's listed here. Remember that with the nouns, we're used to something different. Okay, so for a nice simple noun like doxa, which means glory, remember, the lexicon will list the noun, it will give us its genitive ending, and it will give us the article which will tell us its gender. What gender is this? Hopefully you know. This is the feminine article, right? So this is a feminine noun. It follows first declension, because here's the first declension genitive ending. But now what's going on here with pos? This is not like nominative and a genitive and an article at all. This is like three forms. Hopefully you know. This is the masculine form, the feminine form, and the neuter form. So this tells you, here's what I look like in the masculine, here's me in the feminine, and here's me in the neuter. And you can figure this out, that this is going to be third declension, and there's a first declension, and here's a third. Now, maybe that might confuse you a bit, but notice the nice lexicon will even tell you the genitive forms here, pontos, poses, pontos. It doesn't always do that, but it just gives you that little help here. But there really aren't that many 313 adjectives, so we won't run into a whole bunch of these. But again, when you look up a word, an adjective, in the dictionary, you'll be able to tell it's an adjective because it's listed in its masculine, feminine, and neuter forms. There's no article, right? Because it doesn't tell you if it's masculine or feminine or neuter. It has to be all three. So it gives you all three forms. And the forms that you see will usually be able to help you understand what pattern it follows, in this case 313, to tell you its case number and gender. Now, there aren't actually that many 313 adjectives in the New Testament. There are a lot of 313 participles, but that's for later. It's an important pattern to recognize, but most of the adjectives in the New Testament, in fact 85% of them, follow the 212 pattern. The reason the 313 matters for adjectives has to do mainly with two words that show up all over the place. One of them is pos, which we've already looked at, and the other is the adjective one, like, one man, one woman, one dog, one whatever, okay? Now in English, we just use the word one, right? It doesn't change form, but we're getting used to this. In Greek, that adjective will change forms to show us its case number and gender. And the adjective one follows a 313 pattern. So here it is if we were to look it up. Heis, mia, hen. Okay, so heis is the masculine form, mia is the feminine, and hen is the neuter. It happens to follow a 313 pattern too. Notice how nice it is to give us this nice genitive form so we can see that the stem here would be hen, right? So henas, heni, hena would be, right? And then mias tells us this looks like a first declension, and here's another third declension. Remember, in the genitive, if we see oo, we're looking at second declension. If we see os in the genitive, we're looking at third declension. So it helps us out with the genitive form here. But this is an important adjective to recognize. Let's look at a few in context, just for fun. But first, let's make sure we know the paradigm here. Okay, so heis, mia, and hen we saw were the masculine, feminine, and neuter forms in the nominative case. In the genitive, henas, mias, and henas, okay? So that tells us we're following the 313 pattern. Notice in the masculine, we have heis and then henas, heni, hena. In the feminine, mia, mias, mia, mian, like this, os, on, right? Following the first declension pattern. And in the neuter, hen, henas, heni, hen. So no ending, henas, heni, no ending, hen. All right, and obviously, right, we don't need any plural forms for the adjective one because the adjective one will never modify a plural subject. One trees, one hands, it doesn't make sense. So we only need singular forms. So here is our paradigm for one. Now on to the context. So here we have milion hin, 1 mile. Milion is accusative singular neuter, so the form of hin is also accusative singular neuter. Here we have through one man, di henas anthropu, through one man. Notice henas here is genitive singular and masculine, and here we have anthropu, which is also genitive singular masculine. So our form of henas has to be genitive singular masculine, henas, one man. Or check this one out. Here we have one day. Chimera, remember, was day, but in this case we have the noon, so we're looking at an accusative form, chimeron, mian. So it became feminine, it became accusative, and it stays singular because we're talking about one day. See, isn't this just awesome? Greek is so matchy-matchy. And I could wear you out all day with these, but just one more. Here's heis. Heis, so what form of one is this? Well, nominative singular masculine, right? So we would expect a nominative singular masculine subject, which is exactly what we get. One man. So again, in Greek, the case number and gender of the modifiers always match the case number and gender of the nouns they modify. Now let's look at how pos morphs around to match the noun it modifies, just to drive this point home here. Here we have every tree. A dendron is tree, so therefore is what un means. Therefore, pon dendron, every tree. So notice that dendron is accusative singular neuter, and pon also then is accusative singular neuter. Or look at the word pos morph around here. Here we have posa pharynx. A pharynx is like a valley. But we know from this form that pharynx, even though we may not know this word, we know that it has to be nominative singular feminine, which it is. Or here we have pon haros. A haros is a mountain. And mountain, we know from this, has to be neuter. And in this case, from the context, we also know that it's the nominative case. Notice they match. And if I just slide down a little more, we have all flesh seeing the salvation of God down here. Posa sarx. Well, sarx, we've seen, is a feminine noun, happens to be third declension, but we know, even if we got mixed up on this, because this is posa, it has to be nominative singular feminine, which it is. Again, what I'm trying to show you is just the way that these adjectives change forms to match the nouns they modify. Or here is a nice nominative singular masculine form, pos, right? That has to be nominative singular masculine. Pos anthropos. Well, that's the nominative singular masculine form of anthropos. Again, look at the match. And just one last example here. Just notice this one. We have panta anthropon. Okay, see this ending? That's an accusative singular masculine, right? But here's our accusative singular masculine form of pos. So every man, panta anthropon. Again, the case, number, and gender match. Notice here the declension doesn't match. Panta is third declension. Anthropon is second declension. That doesn't matter. All that matters is that the case, number, and gender match. And here we have panta anthropon repeated. It's repeated again here. But notice that this, here we have that we are warning and teaching all men in all wisdom. Passe Sophia. So look at this combination. Notice how pos became passe, because this is the dative singular feminine form of pos. Passe Sophia. So again, we're just morphing to match. Then notice we have the same form. When we turn to your color-coded text, we have panta, every, anthropon. Anthropon is accusative singular masculine, and this is the accusative singular masculine form of pos right here, right? Okay, and again, we have the case, number, and gender matching up perfectly. The declension's different, but no big deal. As we look at some other examples here we have pontes, all people. This is nominative plural masculine. So here's the form there, pontes. Everyone, all people. Or if we slide on down a little bit more here, we can find all things, panta. So this is this would be the nominative, there we go, nominative singular neuter form, panta. All things came to be through him. And apart from him came to be not even one thing, hin. Here we go again with our hin. So like I said, panta and hin are very common 313 adjectives. We can see that right here in John 1. You have to get used to them. Most of the adjectives will be 212, but these two are important to recognize. And again, all we're trying to get out of this is to understand that adjectives change form to show us their case, number, and gender. They do it by certain patterns. We've seen the 212 pattern. Now we've seen the 313 pattern, and we're almost finished.
Does it seem to you like I'm saying things over and over?
I am. Because what we're learning here applies to all of the Greek substantives. We've seen like how nouns can follow either a first, second, or third declension pattern. We've seen how the article follows a 2-1-2 pattern. We've seen the adjectives can follow 2-1-2 now, or 3-1-3. Later we'll see that pronouns do this and that participles do this. In other words, these patterns of change are followed by all Greek substantives. That's why it's so important to learn these. Now you might be getting a little worried here, like how many patterns are there? Well, don't worry, because we're almost done. Actually, by far the most important is the 2-1-2 pattern. The 3-1-3 pattern occurs a lot in the New Testament. And then there are two other patterns, the 2-2 and the 3-3 pattern, which we will look at next. They're not as common, not as important, but once we're done looking at these four patterns, we're through. And we understand how Greek substantives change to tell us case, number, and gender. We're really making magnificent progress.